Good evening. Welcome to Silicon Valley Buzz, a show about the innovations and creativity taking place today in Silicon Valley. My name is Jim Connor. I'll be your host tonight. We've got a very interesting show, really part of a controversy here in Silicon Valley about the future of development. We've clearly got a housing shortage. We've clearly got traffic. It's very expensive to live in Silicon Valley. And there's a mall referred to as the Vallco shopping center that is essentially a dead mall. And the city of Cupertino and the people who live there have been wrestling with this problem for at least 4 to 6 years as I understand it. And tonight I'm pleased to have two guests with me, Orrin Mahoney, who's running for the city council, a retired person, and John Willey, mechanical engineer, also running for the city council of Cupertino. And you two guys have diametrically opposed positions on this, and I'm delighted that you're here and you're civil, and maybe we'll set a new standard for civil discourse in the country here, which we don't see at the national level. But I want to welcome you to the show. And let's start by, Orrin, you give us an overview, if you will, of the history, the brief history of this project.
Yeah, well, I mean, once upon a time, and I'm probably showing my age, it was the fashion mall in the West Valley. We had Bullock's and J. Magnum and lots of other stores. But through a series of caretaker owners, there was lack of investment, and Stanford got invested, Valley Fair got redone. So it went into a period of decline, and that reached that's a crisis a few years ago where the city actually did an economic study, and the Target store in Cupertino was generating more sales tax than the whole mall. And that's when Penny's was still there, Sears was still there, Macy's was still there, and the rest of the mall. So based on that, the city council decided it was time to revitalize the mall. The challenge there is that the current general plan drives what you can do in a specific area. The general plan at that time said it had to be a mall and it couldn't do anything else. And modern development, whether it be Santana Row or any of the other things that are being revitalized, or some kind of mixed use thing where the office and the housing will pay for the retail. Mm-hmm. So the city council at that time, by a 4-to-1 vote, approved a general plan amendment, which let a developer buy out all the individual property owners. That was another problem with the mall in the past. There were individual property owners, so it was very hard to come up with some kind of integrated plan for what you would do with it. The developer bought out all of the previous owners and went off to come up with what at the time I felt was a very innovative concept. It was called the Hills at Vallco. It was a mixed-use project with its highlight being a rooftop park, a 63-acre rooftop park. It had office there and housing, and at that time there were a group of people in the city that were concerned about the amount of housing, which at that time was like 400 units compared to what we'll talk about later. There was a group that was concerned about that and wanted to roll back that decision, and they put a measure on the ballot, Measure C, that basically would have rolled back that general plan amendment, not only preventing that development from happening, but any real revitalization. The owners put a competing measure on the ballot, and Measure D that would have basically approved it as is, taken it out of the council's hands. Both failed. Yeah. So at that time, it should go back to the council do their job, and they didn't, and we can talk more about that. And in the meantime, the state of California that's concerned, you mentioned housing earlier, the state of California is very concerned about the housing crisis, not just in the Bay Area, but all around the state. And the state passed some laws, one of them called SB 35, that basically said we're going to deal with the fact that cities are not achieving what the state thought were their housing goals, and we're going to be able to bypass the city if they meet certain requirements. The developer took that law and came up with a plan that meets that, called SB 35, and the city council at the same time was working through a process with a consultant to come up with an alternative plan. And last week, that alternative plan was approved on a 3-2 vote by the council, basically saying that the city The city preferred that over SB 35. The developer, we think, prefers that over SB 35. We get way into the details,
Okay.
but that's the high level.
And John, you by and large agree with that? Is that correct?
Some concepts, yes, and some no.
Are there any notable significant ones? Because I
Yes.
wanted to talk about
Yes.
a couple of issues. Where this is located, right on 280, walking distance to the new Apple headquarters, which is an enormous building,
Yes.
and the fact that housing through the Bay Area is crazy, and the fact that this SB 35
Yes.
says that a city cannot impose any traffic requirements or any other requirements, literally other than, I think, water. But I want to see if what you, John, has represented so far is in alignment with
Right,
your
and
reading.
What Oren is represented.
I'm sorry, what Oren? Thank you very much. I want to see what Oren
Yes.
has represented so far is in alignment with your perception.
So the developer that bought it in October of 14 put in a letter to the city asking for 2 million square feet of office. Oren was actually on the city council at that time, and in December, Oren made a motion to give the developer 2 million square feet of office.
You mean to approve 2 million square feet?
Well, it's an allocation.
Yeah, for the
So
project.
first it was to make the allocation for Vallco, and then it was voted on. And again, Oren voted for that 2 million square feet of office.
In this project?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, Oren was saying that the small group was upset about the housing. Now,
I said both, but that's okay.
okay, the housing, the planning department came up with scenario A and scenario B. The RENA requirement is 1,100 units, and the Plan A said give 600 to the Hamptons right next to Vallco, and then give 389 to Vallco. And Plan B said give the 600 to the Hamptons and spread around Cupertino the other 389.
Okay.
So the housing really wasn't the huge issue. It was the 2 million square feet of office.
Office development.
Yes.
And you feel that's what one of the sticking points said. It was okay to do the housing, correct?
Right.
More or less.
More or less, the residents would have preferred the housing spread out because the housing concentrates at the school. So if you put all the housing in one spot, all the kids go to the one school, whereas if you spread it out, all the schools accommodate a few of the kids.
Okay, so let me come back to you then and ask you, what is your, how can I say this, your sense of why did the voters of the city vote down or reject both Measure C and D? The measure says we got a new plan, and one it says, I'll go back to the old standard, and one it says go with the developer's plan. Both were turned down.
Right.
Why?
So
Were they not paying attention? Let me ask you that.
Well, Measure D clearly had the 2 million square feet of office, and it was covered up by a green roof. The developer put out day after day after day flyers like crazy, and all of them said nothing about the 2 million square feet of office hiding underneath. Oren actually was the star of the video for the developer. Again, did you say anything about the 2 million square feet when you presented it to the public?
Let me do this. Let me not get into the personal thing, because I just want to keep the issues on the table.
Okay.
You guys can, after the show, have that out.
Okay.
And
So the 2 million square feet, I went door to door to alert people about the 2 million square feet, and the people were appalled. And so Measure D, in my view, no question about it, failed simply because the 2 million square feet, and had we not gone door to door and let the voters know, then they would have not known. Okay.
They did reject both measures.
Right. So
it
then,
seems to be a gridlock issue.
Yeah. So Measure C would have removed that 2 million square feet, and it would have kept the overall building requirements in the general plan.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me see if we got a couple common elements here. You both agree that there's a deep need for housing, perhaps.
True.
Critical need for housing.
And it's really gotten much worse in the last 4 years.
Yeah.
No question about it.
People tell me all the time,
So
I can't move. We're being forced to move. We don't know what we're going to do. We've lived here for 10, 15 years. We've been renters. It's over for us.
Yes.
We're going to Bakersfield, Sacramento, Fresno, wherever.
Right.
Okay. So everybody agrees there's a need for housing.
Right.
Vallco is essentially a dead, failed project at this point in terms of the shopping center operations.
Right.
So something should be done.
Right. Absolutely.
And it seems to be a bit of a gridlock but in the city because the voters wouldn't approve either measure. And again, there are pros and cons, but neither one got approved. The state comes along and says, you know what, we just can't stand this anymore. We're going to pass this SB 35, kind of a hammer, really, that says once you qualify as a builder, you don't have to you know, and the city has to prove you as being qualified as an SB 35 project. Then you can just go do it. Is that accurate?
That is accurate, but even beside that, you know, you can't. The city doesn't own this. You know, a developer owns it. So what the job of the city council is to get the maximum benefit for the city by whatever that is, whether it be sales tax or place to shop, more housing, whatever we need. But that has to pencil out, and the retail part doesn't pencil out by itself. So somebody has to pay for that.
Sure. Yeah.
And in most of the models now, even now we're seeing at Santana Road, there's got to be an office component. So, you know, we could have a very intelligent discussion about 2 million or 1.8 or 1.7, 1.5, but office needs to be in there as well, in my opinion, for it to pencil out, for it to happen.
Do you need retail at all? I mean, is retail even necessary? You've got, you know, so many other retail alternatives, Amazon being the monster, the elephant in the room. Do you need retail?
So, absolutely. Retail and the experience. You know, 65,000 residents in Cupertino. When Cupertino was formed, there were 20,000 residents, and that area of the city was the retail center for 20,000. We now have 3.5 times that, 65,000 people, and all of that retail now has, poof, gone away. So where do I buy my clothes for my kids? Where do I buy the things that we need for home? We have to now go outside of Cupertino.
But John, I would suggest, friendly suggestion, that when I go to buy my clothes, I basically go to Stanford Shopping Center or some of the other major shopping centers, and they've developed, and everybody in the Bay Area, I think, has recognized you got to drive 10, 15 miles, depending on what you want. Or it doesn't hurt you to drive 10 or 15 miles, hopefully not during traffic.
Well, see, there's the problem, part of the problem. That's that much more traffic as opposed to being able to go get the things you need locally.
But considering, you know, whether it's clothes, there's a lot of specialty items, whether it's cars, computers, clothes, that there seem to be geographic areas, regional areas that specialize, you know, Auto Row, San Jose, what have you. So it doesn't make, you would agree, too much sense to have Auto Row in Cupertino, so the people. Okay.
No problem.
So,
so I'd like to,
sure.
As you know, you're absolutely right. So retail has a broad definition in this context. It includes entertainment as well. So the theaters, the ice skating rink, the bowling alley. Even Santana Row is, you know, it's retail, but it's you know, it's mostly restaurants and other things. When the Borders books, when he couldn't have a bookstore on Santana Row, I thought that there's something's happened there. So I agree with John that we need a gathering place. You know, we have the start of one with the Main Street project, but Cupertino doesn't have a downtown. It's never had a downtown. Partly just, you know, the way it developed, and, you know, the crossroads is, you know, 2 8-lane highways, so it's not very walkable. So I think we both agree we want the retail.
We do want retail. Okay, I see. Because I know if I'm in an office building and I live somewhere, I want to have a restaurant, really. That's what I really want. I want some restaurants and maybe a movie theater, and that would be all fine and dandy. You know, up in Emeryville, where I used to work, they've got this really amazing, a number of areas that they've rehabilitated, redeveloped that whole area. There's theaters and public markets, that's the name of it, and you've got probably 40 restaurants in there, you know, little stalls. It's great. So let me go into another issue then about, it does seem, let me get a summary at this point. Was the city council not effective or did not get the job done? Is that your perspective on the first pass 4 years ago? Do you think that's what happened?
No, I think 4 years ago they were making progress, and then so all I got put on hold, basically. The council had to stop until we saw what happened with Measure C and D, because otherwise whatever they were doing was spinning their wheels. In my opinion, they after that it took a long time to get this other process going, and in the meantime, as I say, the state stepped in and really changed the whole dynamic, as you pointed out.
So did you want to comment on that? I want to go on to the SB 35 issue, unless you want to comment.
I would like to just drop back just a tad bit on the experience and what Vallco. Santana Row, great place, and if you were to say, okay, make Vallco Santana Row Cupertino. And Santana Row is 42 acres, Vallco's 52. The retail at Santana Row is 650K. Size it up 23%. You're at 800,000 retail. It's 1.2 today, so you now cut off 1/3, throw it away. You've got the experience of the ice arena, the bowling alley, the movie theaters. All that's great. The amount of office when Santana Row was put in, 65,000. Size it up 23%. You're at 80,000 square feet. That's all. 80,000. Have some office there. And the residential at Santana Row is 622 units. Size it up today with the employees that have been brought in, you'd be at 765. The one thing I would add to that to make it successful in Cupertino, we don't have Valley Fair across the street, so put absolutely at least one department store, but preferably two in there. Macy's, I think, would jump at the chance to have Macy's Cupertino, because they already did, and they only left when the mall was pushed out of business. They would be back in a heartbeat, and I think a second one would be great, like a Kohl's. Then the people in Cupertino, now if you want this thing approved, the people in Cupertino need to be able to get behind it. You tell them you've got the Macy's and the Kohl's along with all this, and you've got some amount of housing, very, very small amount of the office, and the good retail there. You're going to have Cupertino running to get this project going.
Well, could be. I'm not a resident of Cupertino, but I take your point. So let me move on.
I would like to.
You want to refute that? Okay.
Well,
or counterpoint it. Go ahead.
Counterpoint. I mean, so Macy's for a while actually wanted to have the Macy's in Vallco be a discount store, and the city council at the time, kind of arm twisted and said no. So it never was a full. It always was cut down. If you look at Macy's, they're closing stores. So the idea that they would open a store in Vallco, my opinion is a pipe dream. Okay. So all right. Enough said.
Good. Let's go on to this current issue of, thank you for that, SB 35 versus the Tier 1, Tier 2 projects.
Yep.
Because we got about 10 minutes left, and we ought to get those on the table. So I'll let you, why don't you tell me about SB 35, and you'll tell me about Tier 2. Is that okay?
I would like to say some things about SB 35.
Okay, then we'll have you both. Okay, go ahead.
So SB 35, the purpose is affordable housing. Yeah. So what it does is the focus is on affordable housing. So 50% of the units need to be affordable, low, and very low.
Yeah.
They don't deal with what's key in Cupertino, and I think we all agree is teacher housing because of our schools. That would have to have some moderate housing to do that. So all that affordability wouldn't help at least one of the key things we have in Cupertino. In order to pay for that, it had 1.8 or 2 million square feet of office. It had no community benefits, which were in previous proposals, and we can talk about Tier 2, some things for the city and for the schools to mitigate some of the impacts that we're all worried about. As you pointed out earlier, it didn't have anything about traffic.
And it doesn't have to have anything about traffic. They're exempt. They're exempt from environmental reports and research.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was understandable to me why the developer went in that route, given the stonewalling that was going on. But I haven't heard of anybody that would prefer SB 35 over what the council passed last week.
Yeah, it seems to be, the state saying we got to have housing, and if you can't get your act together, we're going to let this go ahead this way. Exemptions from traffic, exemptions from environmental studies, and so on like that. Fair statement?
That's my understanding.
Okay. Then, do you want to add something to that?
So the SB 35 that was put in, the city council removed the height limits for Vallco.
That's right.
So he put in his SB 35 with 22-story buildings, 7 22-story buildings, because the height had been removed. The VSP that the city came up with,
VSP?
Vallco specific plan.
Okay.
Which you said Tier 1, Tier 2.
Yeah,
Tier 2 is what got approved.
So make long story short, there's a new specific plan that's come along to compete with SB 35, correct?
Well, right. But the SB 35, the last statement, he put in a plan, SB 35. SB 35 is a state law that says it has to be 2/3 residential units, 2/3 of the square footage, and it does not comply. His project counts the parking, it counts the amenities, it counts the swimming pool as square footage for housing. It does not comply. So
But it's been certified to comply.
No, it's only been certified by the city. It has not been certified by the state. And that's what's currently out for
I'm not a
review.
legal reader,
Right.
but as I read this, it seemed to suggest that if the city certifies it, that's good enough for the state. That's what
Well,
I got
it's
out of
been
this.
put to the state.
Okay.
You know, the state is the one that has to enforce their laws. They made the law. Those are the requirements. Enforce it.
Okay. So then the other alternative was this Tier 1, Tier 2 plan
Right.
as an alternative
Right.
to SB 35.
Right.
Would you like to explain that?
Sure.
Okay.
So the city went off, and we truly believe the developer had a lot of input in that because it came back so close to the SB 35. Instead of 22-story buildings, 14-story buildings. Okay, so now you've got these two. Now the VSP, Vallco Specific Plan, is 11.5 million square feet, where the SB 35 is 10 million square feet. Why is a 11.5 million square feet project only 14 stories, but the SB 35 is 22 stories? It was a very contrived plan by the developer to scare Cupertino. You don't want this SB 35, take the 14-story specific plan.
Yeah. But
And it was
let me
done.
interrupt you. Okay, let me interrupt you though, but they're throwing in all these other things, new city hall, civic center, all this other stuff, right?
The residents that we have talked to, I personally have talked to hundreds,
Yeah.
they're not excited about the benefits.
Contribution to the school, big contribution to the schools.
The big contribution of students to those schools is a real problem. Those benefits are a one-time type thing, whereas the students are going to be forever.
Well, there are sales, there are property taxes out of these sales, these units. I'm trying to give you the counter argument that there's a lot
The
of property
apartments is one parcel tax for the bunch,
Okay.
as opposed to sellable units where it's a parcel tax for each one. So the true money that gets generated, the VSP with the units, 2,600 units, is going to put roughly 1,500 students to the elementary school district, and it's going to put approximately 500 units or students to the high school.
That's based on the demographer's report or your own report?
It's based on the numbers, and we used the same numbers as the demographers used.
All right. So let me let Orin speak about that.
Well, so a couple things there.
And let me just clear up. It is true that the plan, the developer, Sand Hill Properties, is going to put quite a bit of money to the school district, new city hall, and a couple other things.
Yeah, so so let's start with some of the basics. So it's a complicated issue in Cupertino because we have two school districts. We have an elementary school district and a high school district. The high school district is so-called basic aid, so they're funded on property tax. So the increase in property tax, we think, is going to give them about an extra $10 million a year, just that.
Per year.
Per year, not counting any other benefits that they're going to get from this project.
Okay.
The elementary school district is per student, so for them it's particularly important to have some of the other financial benefits.
All right.
I think there's, I don't have my notes on exactly the students. I know that there's been skepticism for a long time among the Better Cupertino group about student generation. A couple of years ago, they didn't even think that the enrollment was going to go down. The enrollment has gone down now. I mean, you can't argue with that. So
That's true. It has gone down because people can't move here anymore. Young families can't afford to move here.
So, I mean, it's interesting that we started this discussion saying we all agreed about more housing, but what I'm hearing now is housing is a big problem because the schools are going to be impacted. So, again, in my opinion, housing is going to do the schools, office is going to do traffic, this is going to do that, this is going to do that. I know there are people in that group that would like to see it. They still think it could be an entire retail mall, and I just don't think that's possible.
So I would disagree with that.
You don't think there's anybody in the group that thinks that?
It's a totally different time, and I don't see that. I think everybody has agreed that it's mixed use, and I think Santana Row sets a good example for the magnitude, and when you're talking about the magnitude of what this developer wants, I mean, it'd be like taking 3 Santana Rows and piling them on top of each other.
All right, so let me ask you a question. Has anybody built, or has the developer built a model of what they're proposing so you can see exactly how high the buildings are, or is it they have the right to build this type of height? You know, you mentioned the 22 stories versus 14 stories and so on.
So I saw pictures of a model of Measure D.
Okay.
I personally, being an engineer,
Yep.
I've looked at their drawings for Measure D, and I've also looked at them for the specific plan. I have seen nothing from the developer. I've gone to the city website, nothing for the specific plan, only the heights that get called out up to 120 feet rather than
All right.
220
Stated
feet.
maximums, in other
Yeah.
words. Okay, so they haven't presented a design.
Haven't presented anything.
Okay, so or am I wrong on that?
No, you're correct. And actually, I mean, this is a really important point. The best way, the absolute best way to minimize the height is to build a big box. You can, you know, all you got to do is, you know.
It's either
Yeah.
width and
Right.
or height, yes.
So if you want open space, if you want to protect the abutting residential neighborhoods, which these plans have done, the only way to do that is to make some of it higher. So whether they're going to, whether the project's going to end up going to full height or not, we don't know. We haven't seen that.
All right.
That's only if you go with 3.5 times the amount of mass that Santana Row
Right, I'm
would
saying
have.
for a given-
If you were to do Santana Row at Valley Fair with the same density, boom, you're done.
Okay.
If you were even to put another 25% in or something,
And as soon as you get a developer that wants to do that,
Yeah.
we'll see.
So,
that's opinion.
all right. So here we are. You both are running for Cupertino election, city council election on November 6th. How will this be resolved? Do you think there's a resolution coming? I know this Tier 2 looks good. It looks good. I mean, you don't know what the actual height will be, but they're putting a lot of money into it. And the SB 35 looks pretty draconian after you've explained it to me.
Yep.
Agree there. How will this get resolved? Is there anything in sight, or does the developer hold a gun to your head and say, it's SB 35, you guys got 60 days to make up your mind?
So a challenge to the SB 35 has been put in, and it's up to the state to look at the required 2/3 of the square footage, and that has to be resolved first.
Good.
The VSP that has now been put in is likely to get challenged by the residents and get overturned.
All right.
And
So-
as a city councilman, I would be dealing with those, trying to fix the problem that was created with the 2 million square feet and the removal of the building heights. I will be dealing with that problem that never should have been
Okay.
created.
So we're completely out of time. I'd love to go on another hour, but I've got all kinds of signals waving at me here. So let me take a moment, thank both of you, Orrin Mahoney, John Willie, and I'll give you a moment just to say if anybody wants to follow up with you, do you have contact information, emails, or websites?
Yeah, so my website is www.mahoney4council.com, and or you can email me at mahoney4council@comcast.net, or you'll be seeing all our mailers.
All right, John?
So, and my website is JON4democracy.com.
Good.
And it's got my phone number and email address and stuff like that on it. Happy to hear from the residents. I want to hear from all the residents.
Very good.
My purpose is to make sure Cupertino's future is driven by the residents, not the developers.
So I want to thank both of you for coming in. I really enjoyed both of you. You're very dedicated, you're very sincere, very authentic, and I really welcome your efforts and contributions to make a very confusing story moderately understandable. So thanks so much for being on Silicon Valley.
We did agree on a number of points.
We did indeed, and I want to thank you for having this.
Okay.
This is a real good thing to get the residents up to speed on where everything is.
Very good. Okay. Let's see where we are.